Okay, folks, here we are with my good friend Jeff Brown,
Hi,
President
everyone.
and CEO of Alpha Social Media Inc. And Jeff is a workplace education trainer. So, what we want to talk about today is kind of some resources on what you should do to keep yourself up to date. Jeff is a great resource, and we're going to kind of pick his brain for a little bit and try and help him. Jeff, so let's start with social media. Somebody who's new to social media, what should they be learning and what shouldn't they be learning? And where should they start?
Well, one of the places that I suggest is that they start to learn how to start with the basic networks. If you're just starting off, you're looking at Facebook, Twitter, maybe some Instagram. I'm a big fan of doing a few well, and then from there branching out. If you get involved in too many, you're going to be all over the place, and it's going to be frustrating. And the thing that you have to learn is that social media is about being social. In other words, you have to build a community around your business.
Yep.
You stepping on a platform with your bullhorn and blasting stuff out is not going to do it for your social media. I tell my participants, add a few people at a time, interact with them, build a strong community. People that like your business are going to refer your business, going to help your business grow. There's a win for them. There's a win for you in the relationship. That's the way to start it, to get things rolling.
Yeah, I would agree. Aren't you and I kind of point and check in that one? We met probably about 10 years ago on Twitter, right, Jeff? It's going to be that long. And
we met to Twitter, yeah.
And we've met in person. And even though we're at opposite ends of the country, I'm more central, you're in sunny Nova Scotia, we have an amazing relationship because we've taken that off social media and on the things like Zoom meetings and helped each other out in classes and courses and collaborate a little bit and work together and do things like that, right?
Yes, and that's what the whole point of social media is. If we're going to use it for business, it's about building relationships with other business people and customers that's actually going to work for your business. Yeah. And so it's not about how many numbers you have on social media. It's actually who you know.
It's so true. I mean, I kind of look at my Twitter feed, and last I looked, I'm up around 19,000 followers, which at the end of the day, I really don't care about the 19,000. But what I've got probably out of that a regular group who I engage with on a regular basis. And I know one of the things I like to do is I go through my Twitter feed a couple times a week, and I'll choose 10 people I haven't talked to in a while, and I'll reach out and say hello, and I'll say hello to somebody and say, can I help you with a problem, or can we assist you with something, or, try and help people instead of just saying, here's the latest article, go read it kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely, because if you have to be a benefit to others. The old saying is, if people don't know you care, then they won't care about you, essentially.
Yeah. And so if you were doing social media, and let's kind of go with Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn a little bit, if you were doing business to business, where would you put your time right now?
If I'm going to go business to business right now, I would like to build on LinkedIn, at least to start a connection. And at the end of the day, where possible, your social media always should end up with a coffee somewhere. You should go meet someone. Yeah. Take it off social media and get out there and meet someone. Mm-hmm. I'm a real fan of using Twitter, for instance, to make that original lead, that original connection, and then see where it goes from there. Twitter is really good at just short, hi, how you doing? What's up for today? Here's a great thing I want to share with you, or what are you up to? Can we meet for coffee? Things like that.
We both have animals, so ignore the dogs in the background.
Yeah.
But it's so true, and I would agree with you. I mean, I've got really good long-term relationships. I mean, we both know a good friend of ours on Twitter at Graffiti BMX Cop, and Scott Mills is kind of the master of relationships too on Twitter, and he knows how to. He'll often stand there and say, by the way, why don't you just pick up the phone and call me? And he gets that as much as you and I do, right? So.
Absolutely. And he's the guy that really, when you think about community policing, that type of work, he's the kind of guy that's actually spent the time to build the relationships, that's allowed him to get face-to-face with people that others can't get face-to-face with. He is absolutely super in that role.
So true. Now, if you were to sort of say, you know, we're a little different, we're a little older. If you were millennials, what do you think of things like Snapchat or Pinterest? I know we talk about starting with basics, which is the way I preach it as well. Yeah. But do you think the millennials still have a market in those places, or do you think they're kind of a waste of time?
Regardless of what social network they use, it's how they use it that counts.
Yeah.
I was watching a show last night on social media and young people, and if it's simply going to be device to device and there's nothing beyond that, one of the salient moments of the whole movie, so to speak, was this person had a lot of friends on Facebook, for instance, but he never had anybody go and hang out with.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to all these social networks, whether Snapchat, Instagram, that a lot of them are hanging around, if they're not taking it deeper than just phone to phone, then especially if they're going to be young entrepreneurs, they're missing the boat on it.
Yeah, and that's where we're kind of a little lucky in Toronto. Like a lot of these big social media companies, Toronto's a haven for startups and social media companies. So in Toronto, we're lucky because there's all kinds of events where you can go to and actually meet people. And some of them are free and some of them are low cost. And there's also meetup groups. And I think that's the value, is taking a group and going out and meeting 10 or 20 people. And then if you're lucky, you come out of them with one or two really good connections. And sometimes they're not just even work connections. They're just people to collaborate with and bounce ideas off of and help each other out kind of thing. And that's
absolutely.
And that's the hardest part, being an entrepreneur working from home. It can be a lonely business sometimes if you don't have people to bounce ideas off of, right? So.
Yeah, and you have to force yourself to go. As an entrepreneur, you got to force yourself to make phone calls, business meetings, go for coffee.
Yeah.
As a young entrepreneur, I would encourage young entrepreneurs to get face-to-face with people. And the reason why it's so important is you get to create that good first impression. That's the thing that solidifies. That's where you and I connected up, Rob. That good first impression.
So true.
And that solidified everything for years.
Yeah, no question. I'm going to switch gears for a minute. The other thing you teach, and you spend a lot of time teaching, is WordPress. And we both know, for those people watching, WordPress accounts for, depending on who you talked about, 30 to 35% right now of all content management systems out on the internet. It's probably number one. If you listen to a show like WordPress Plugins A to Z, which is a big plugin show, they claim there's over 60,000 plugins in a repository right now. So, it's growing. If you were to start doing WordPress as a trainer, what would you suggest people start with, and what skills do they need to create a website?
Well, one of the first things I show them is, how does a WordPress site get installed?
Yeah.
They need to know whether they're going to do it themselves or someone's going to do it for them. They need to know how it gets installed, how long it takes, and what are some simple best practices when you install a WordPress site. I installed one for a woman on another site. I won't say where it was, but for instance, the automatic username was admin.
Mm-hmm.
And that is absolutely the kiss of death when it comes for WordPress.
Yes.
And so what we had her do was create another username, log out, log in with the other username, and remove the admin. Yeah. Something like that. And when you're going through the setup, use a good, strong password, because that's in a lot of ways where a lot of WordPress sites get breached. Something as simple as the WordPress install, where you start it with a good username and a good password, those are so critical for moving forward. Because as an entrepreneur, if you get hacked, that's a non-billable scenario. No one's going to pay you to fix your website. That's money out of your own pocket. So if you don't do it right from the start, that could be a real accident waiting to happen, so to speak.
No question. And it's funny because now all your web hosts have nice automated scripts. You push a button, it does it all for you. I still remember the days when I used to do websites manually. So
Yes.
I'd upload the WordPress, I'd go in, I'd change, the configuration files, and then I do it all manually. And I can still do a manual install, and it's a long way around, but I don't think I've done one actively forever. Like, it's just because you push a button, you run a script, and then you go in and change what you need to be changed, right?
Absolutely.
So we talk about that. Now, other skills that we find that people need is a little bit of graphic knowledge, right, Jeff?
Yes.
And what do you suggest for that?
Well, ideally, I've got WordPress. A lot of my students have WordPress as well. I like that, but there are other solutions, Canva, for instance. But whatever solution you go with, what's absolutely critical is file size.
Yes.
Make sure that file is as absolutely small as possible before you upload it. Mm-hmm. And I'm a fan of putting metadata into pictures, for instance, your website address, and load it up to the website, having stuff like that in it. And when it gets up there, I can't tell you how many sites I've seen where they're not using alt tags or alternative text, as it's also known. So file name for the image, having the image at a good file size, having metadata going, and when you upload it to the website, make sure you put alt text in it. I can't tell you how many sites, how many big companies don't use alternative tags or alt text. It's just shameful.
And there's enough resources out there that will go through and sort of analyze your site for free and say, okay, you haven't put the alt text in, or you haven't put the proper tags in, so why not go and fix it? And and they're not too hard. I mean, all you got to do is go to Google and kind of do a Google search and say, this is what I'm looking for, kind of thing, and do it. And you don't have to, starting out, you don't have to spend some money to do some of this stuff. They're there. I mean, down the road, you probably want to spend a little bit of money to have the right tools, but to get a basis, you don't need to.
Absolutely.
I kind of subscribe to, and I think we've talked about this offline multiple times, I subscribe to the 100K file size, or as close to it as I can get. The exception might be a header photo up at the top. It might be a few other things. And I would suggest to people, unless you're a designer or you're trying to show off some photos, like if you're a photo person, that's a little different because your business is a little different. But I would strongly suggest that you kind of stay to that kind of a model. And I would say, if you don't think there's a reason for it, go look at some media sites like The Star or CNET or USA Today or CNN. They have reasons for doing stuff, and and they get a lot of hits, right? So
absolutely.
And I mean, that's part of the parcel. What do you think about domain names? Do you think it's a good idea for somebody to use their name.com, or do you think they're better off to use something that reflects what they're doing in their domain name?
Well, this all comes back to, we've had this conversation, Rob, over and over and over again about keywords. Do you want to go to your company as your domain, or do you want to use a product or a service in your domain? And at the end of the day, all this stuff really gets determined by keyword research. And what I mean by that is, if your website's going to become a billboard. So the question is, where are you going to put it? Keywords represent traffic. So are you going to pick words there's a lot of search, a lot of relevant search? And if you're going to use your company, when you set up your company, it should have part of your keyword in it. For instance, alpha, social media. I've got social media built right into my company name. But if you don't have that, then what are the keywords that you want, and what domains? They're like land. Once they're gone, they're gone. But what domains exist that you could use that would help you show up in search?
I would agree.
We're going to put a website up. We absolutely want to maximize it as best as possible, and all the different areas that Google's concerned about. And one of the things is the domain names.
Yeah, the other thing I would add to that too is succession planning. If you plan on using your name and then down the road you say, I want to sell this business, or I want to retire, or I want to get out, it's really hard to sell jeffbrown.com to Michael Smith. And, I mean, that's the reality of it. Yeah. So I think the other thing to look at is if you use a name in there, like Alpha Social Media Inc. or StunningDigitalMarketing.com or any of these big names, IBM.com, you can turn around and do something with that, right? So
yes, absolutely. That's a great point, Rob.
Yeah, so I think that's part of it. What do you think the biggest mistake that people doing new WordPress websites do?
They don't have a plan for the website from the get-go. Yeah. You and I have had this discussion. We're not hanging web pages. We just don't put pages up just for the sake of having a page. Every page that goes up on a website, there's got to be a plan. There's got to be a strategy. When someone arrives at that page, at the bottom or somewhere in the middle, there's got to be a call to action. There's got to be something more that they can do. If we're going to build trust, maybe a link to another article to keep them reading. Or if you're selling a product, there's got to be an easy button so they can buy that.
Yeah, there's no question.
Don't hang it. Don't create a web page or a post unless you absolutely have an idea of what you want that thing to do. That's just a waste of time if you don't plan.
I think a lot of people kind of think a website people just kind of go to and then they buy. And I think where people get caught is they don't put calls to action on pages, and they sort of say, and they forget the whole purpose of a website is to generate leads, and then you have, or business leads, and then you have to convert and close them. And there's a lot of people that don't seem to subscribe to that theory, and I think that theory is really important. And remember, your website is there to generate you business, not just to look pretty.
Absolutely, absolutely. And then the one story I remember is this town a million miles away from me set up this big shopping site. And for about a year, nobody sold anything on the site. So I happened to go to that town, which is a million miles away from here, and we checked out to see if anybody could actually buy something on the site.
Couldn't buy it?
Hooked the PayPal up to the sales funnel. So therefore, customers were just getting frustrated. No one ever tested the buy process, and so no one could buy. They put all these nice shiny objects in front of people, but they couldn't buy it online.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've got a couple clients, and they where they do really well, believe it or not, is they have stuff on their website for sale, and because of the types of business, one's a jeweler, people tend to actually look at the stuff and then they come in and they buy in store. It's really interesting. His online store is more a catalog. And even though you could buy it online, people in his business tend to come in. So
he's a guy that's really got the message that when people walk into the store, it's go time. It's value added because they could buy at the website, but he's like the Cheers of his industry. You come in not just for the buy, you come in for the experience.
That's true. What he does is he talks to people. So there's a lot of discussion out there that when people come into stores and stuff, what you got to use is storytelling. You got to find out what their story is and a little bit about them. And he spends his time when he's talking to customers, he'll talk to them about about how their kids are, how their family is, what they're up to. And you say, why is that relevant? Well, it is relevant because it's telling them jewelry is an interesting business because it's disposable income usually. People don't go in and buy jewelry the way we buy a car or we buy a computer or we buy a house. It's stuff that's needed. It's all disposable, and it's totally different. So it's how do you get people to part with that disposable money nicely, right? So
absolutely, and it's going to take a really good relationship with these people. Because you're building value. You're building a story in the buy, but also the story that the purchaser can tell to the family from there. And that good experience, he can then refer people back to the business because of what has happened there. So even though his website is a catalog and they could buy off there, they're coming because of the experience.
That's true.
A lot of businesses still need to keep in mind your frontline staff is absolutely mission critical for the success of the business.
So true, so true. So, we've watched some trends in this business, and one of the biggest trends, I guess about 8 or 9 years ago, everyone used to be buying frameworks that were building websites. So they bought things like Headway, Genesis, Thesis. And then there's been this kind of shift. And I think the shift has been because of complexity and cost and a few other things. People are going more to page builders. So when I say page builders, we'll talk about Beaver Builder or Elementor, if our viewers are familiar with that, or they'll go to something like, I know I've made the move to a theme called the Veda, which is the #1 selling theme of all time, and it has a page builder in it called the Fusion Builder. Why do you think that shift happened?
For instance, when I train a lot of people in WordPress, the hardest thing of the whole course is to find the theme. And not only that, but these are people that make their money not building WordPress sites, but they're learning to build a website for their business. So they absolutely need to have something that's simple, something that can look really great out of the box, and something that's got a little bit more expandability than other sites, for instance, Wix, Weebly, sites like that. Something that's more robust and it looks great. They can create something awesome.
Yeah. And it's interestingly enough, I'm going to throw this one out there so we can have a laugh when we've talked about it. I have a friend who runs a content creators group, Kim Doyle, on Facebook, and somebody posted in Kim's website, in Kim's group a couple of weeks ago, shout out to Kim, that Wix actually builds their blog, interestingly enough, on WordPress. And isn't that ironic? Now, what people don't realize is because of open source code, and WordPress is open source, a lot of these page builders have actually forked it, meaning applied their code to their sites and done that. But I wouldn't suggest building. The other thing I would suggest from a developer standpoint is don't get hung up on the open source and security issues. The reality is the more the market, the more the security issues. It's probably more important to keep your software up to date and keep regular backups. And by the way, if you're not going to do it, get somebody to do it for you, because, every day I look at groups and somebody says, I got hacked last night. I say, okay, do you have a backup? What's that? and I'd be facetious, but I mean, on the other hand, if you had a backup, you wouldn't even care if you got hacked. You could go back and do a restore, and away you'd be in an hour, kind of thing.
There's so many good reasons to have a backup besides a hack. I mean, you do a plugin, it damages the site, and even taking the plugin out doesn't fix it. Then the backup gets you back in business potentially under 15 minutes. And then without even having to bother your host. Now, a lot of hosts are pretty good for getting back, but it could be 48 hours. And in that time period, you got to watch that Google you don't want to interrupt Google and what Google's looking at on your website. So being able to get your backup up really quick, that is mission critical. You need to know that. That's one of the things that I teach in my WordPress Part 1 course is how do we do a backup and test the backups just to make sure they actually work.
Do you know how many people, I spent a long time in IT and in the healthcare sector, and we used to test backups on a bi-weekly basis, and how many people actually don't test a backup. So they'll have thousands of backups and they don't even know if they're good. That's,
I've got a good story for you, Rob, on this.
Go ahead.
This is a major corporation 1 million miles away from here. They got a server and they got tape backups. And so server dies, so they just go and buy a new server. They're taking the tape backups there, and they try to load them in. The IT guy never tested any of the tape backups to see that if they were actually working. And so they couldn't do it. And so what they ended up doing was hand bombing financial data for 6 months. And this wasn't a mom and pop shop. This is a major big corporation. And it wasn't a lot of fun. Strangely enough, the guy was gone to another business.
No kidding. No kidding. And I know of another story with an Australian web host a number of years ago. Their biggest web host, they actually had their backup server hacked and compromised like thousands of customers. And it was like, so what I would suggest is don't just rely on your web host for backups. Actually do them. You know.
Yeah, because stuff can happen. You have to have a 1, 2, 3 system that you and I have talked about.
Yeah, no question. Just to kind of wrap up a little bit, if somebody wanted to learn a little bit about WordPress, besides, you know, if they're in Nova Scotia, getting into your WordPress courses, do you have any quick resources that you can throw out there?
For instance, we know lynda.com, if you've got a library card, if you're in Nova Scotia, first, I know they do this in Toronto, you have free access to online learning that way. Not only that, I bought the toolkit from iThemes, but they have free WordPress webinars that you can go to in training.ithemes.com. That's another resource.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places that you could go. YouTube, if you want to learn how to do one simple thing, you can just type that in the search and then find the YouTube video you want specifically on that. There are a ton of resources out there. You just have to go and find them. Yeah,
I'll throw 2 others out there for you. One is a podcast I absolutely love for developers called WP Plugins A to Z, done by Marcus Couch. Marcus is well known in the WordPress community, and John overall. John's Canadian. He's out of Victoria. Marcus is out of Laguna Beach, California. Wonder, you know, I listen to way too many of them.
Yes.
And these guys are a resource because what they do is they kind of highlight plugins. And I've used a few myself, whereas I've been looking for something. The other thing I'll throw out there is I'm not a big fan of Dummies books. They're the series by IDG. But there is a book called WordPress for Dummies. The author is a lady by the name of Lisa Sabin Wilson. And it's the only dummies book I actually recommend on a regular basis because the book is a good foundation for learning WordPress.
Absolutely.
And I don't think there's a better book out there, to be honest with you. I mean, Lisa knows her stuff. She's been at conferences. She's been at WordCamps. And by the way, if you get a chance to go to a WordCamp, go once. If it's, you know, in an area where it's worth going to.
Yes.
The chance to meet some people and do some stuff. But really, Lisa gets it, and she's approachable on Twitter and Facebook and things like that. So
yes, very much so.
Jeff, thanks for spending a little time with us talking about some resources. If somebody wants to get a hold of you, how do they do that?
They can reach me. They can go to my website, alphasocialmediainc.com, or they can email me at info@alphasocialmediainc.com. Yeah. Those are 2 quick ways that they can get a hold of me.
Yeah. And thanks, Jeff, and you have a wonderful day, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Talk to you soon, Rob. Thank you.